My name is Aaliyah Whitmore, and the night my life changed forever did not begin with screaming or chaos. It began with silence. I remember lying in the emergency room, the white lights above me blurring together as doctors moved around my bed. I could feel warm blood pooling inside my body, and I knew something was very wrong. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold my phone, but I kept thinking about one thing over and over again. My 3-year-old twins, Lily and Lucas. I was not afraid of dying in that moment. I was afraid of my children waking up without me there. Welcome to Auntie Rose Narrates. Before today's story of betrayal and self-discovery, please subscribe and hit like to help these stories be heard. Drop your city or country in the comments. It always warms my heart. Now let's begin. The nurse gently touched my shoulder and said, "You should call someone." Her voice was soft, almost like a lullaby. I nodded. I did have someone. Or at least I thought I did. I called my parents. I waited for the ring to end, waited for my mother's familiar voice, waited for even a sigh or a sleepy hello or a "what happened, baby?" Instead, the call went unanswered. My chest tightened, both from pain and from something deeper that had nothing to do with the accident. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed. It was a message in our family group chat. A message that would split my life into before and after. "You've always been a nuisance and a burden. We have concert tickets tonight. Figure it out yourself." I stared at the words. At first, I thought it was a joke, a bad one. Then I read it again, and again. The room felt colder. The heart monitor beeped steadily beside me, like a slow reminder that my body was still here, even if everything else suddenly felt gone. For years, I had helped them. Mortgage payments, medical bills, little emergencies that became big ones. I had shown up every time they called, every single time. And now, when I needed them for just a few hours so someone could sit with my babies while doctors tried to save my life, I was told I was a burden. I did not cry. Strangely, I felt very still, like a lake after a storm. I hired a nanny service from my hospital bed and paid triple the price. Then, with the 4 in my arm and the taste of metal in my mouth, I made a quiet decision. I was done. No more rescuing. No more pain. No more begging to be loved. 2 weeks later, when I had finally come home and the bruises had started to fade, there was a loud knock on my front door. I opened it, and the person standing on the other side would change everything. And that is where the real story begins. When I opened the door that day, sunlight spilled across the hallway floor, forming a warm square beneath my feet. I remember feeling the air shift, that strange stillness. You notice before something important happens, but before I tell you who was there, I need to tell you how we got here. Because moments like that do not appear out of nowhere. They grow slowly, like cracks in a wall you ignore until the whole thing finally breaks. My name is Aaliyah Whitmore. I am 34 years old. I live in a small 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of a quiet American suburb, with trees lining the streets and children's bicycles left on lawns like tiny forgotten dreams. I am also a cardiology resident, the kind of job where days and nights bleed into each other and sleep becomes something you promise yourself, like a gift you never unwrap. And I am a single mother of twins. Lily and Lucas are 3 years old, all curls, big eyes, and endless questions about the moon, dogs, and why cereal floats in milk. They laugh with their whole bodies, the way only small children know how. Some mornings, I look at them sitting at the kitchen table with crumbs on their cheeks, and I think, you are the best thing that ever happened to me, and also the scariest, because loving them means knowing that losing me would break their world. Their father left before they were born. He said he wasn't ready to be a dad. He said he needed time. Then he stopped calling altogether. I stopped waiting. Sometimes pain does not explode. Sometimes it simply dries up like a river that stops flowing. So it was just the three of us, and then there was my family. I grew up in a house where love was something you earned by staying quiet, by doing well, by not needing too much. My parents were the kind of people who talked about reputation at the dinner table more than they talked about feelings. My mother liked clean countertops and clean stories. My father liked control and silence. And I learned to be useful. I learned to fix problems. I learned that if you were helpful enough, maybe you would be kept. When I got into medical school, everyone said they were proud. But pride in my family always had strings attached. It sounded like, we're proud of you, but don't forget where you come from. We're proud of you, but your brother is struggling, help him. We're proud of you, but we need money this month. So I helped. I paid little things at first, a phone bill here, some groceries there. Then bigger things, car repairs, credit cards, co-signing papers I should never have signed. Eventually, I was paying their mortgage, their health insurance, and their emergencies, which never stopped being emergencies. They called it family responsibility. I called it love, but love that is only felt when money moves is not really love. It is a transaction wearing a warm coat. The accident happened on a rainy evening. I had just finished a long shift. The roads shone black like mirrors. A car ran a red light and hit mine from the side. I remember the sound, metal folding, glass breaking, my heartbeat becoming something loud and unfamiliar. The world spun and then went quiet. I woke up in the hospital not knowing if my children were okay, not knowing if my body would hold together, not knowing if life would continue the same way. And in that moment, I asked my parents for the simplest thing, time. Just a few hours, just to watch Lily and Lucas. What I received instead was a message that said I was a burden, a nuisance, an inconvenience when plans were more important in my life. Something inside me ended that day, but something else began. For the first time in years, I looked at the balance sheet of my life, all the giving, all the sacrificing, all the quiet swallowing of hurt, and I realized I was the only one standing in my own corner. So I stopped the payments, stopped the rescues, stopped answering every call that started with, "Can you do me a favor?" The quiet afterward was strange. My phone, which used to buzz all day with requests, went still. No, how are you feeling? No, are the kids okay? Only silence where family was supposed to be. 2 weeks after the accident, I was home with the twins. The apartment smelled like oatmeal and cinnamon. Lucas was lining up toy cars on the living room rug. Lily was singing to her stuffed rabbit in a soft whisper. Sunlight touched their faces gently, as if the world itself loved them, Then came the knock, It wasn't soft. It was firm. The kind of knock that expects to be answered. My heart skipped, paused, and then started again a little too fast. The twins looked up at me. "Mommy, someone's here," Lily said. I nodded and stood up slowly. Every bruise in my body still remembered the accident, and some hurts cannot be seen on skin. I walked to the door, each step feeling heavier than it should. I opened it, and when I saw who was standing there, I felt the air leave my lungs, not from fear, not from anger, but from the feeling that the past I thought I had closed had returned and was standing on my doorstep. They said my name, very softly, and that was when I realized this visit was not about love, it was about everything. I had finally stopped giving, and what they said next would change the direction of my life again. The person standing at my door was my mother. She looked smaller than I remembered, as if worry had been folding her in on herself for years. Her hands were clasped tightly around her purse strap, knuckles pale, lips pressed into a thin line that tried to look calm and failed. Behind her stood my father, arms crossed over his chest. Face unreadable, the same expression he used when bills came in or when someone disappointed him. For a moment, nobody spoke. The hallway outside my apartment was quiet, the afternoon light slipping through the small window at the end of the corridor. Somewhere above us, a child laughed, the sound echoing down the stairwell. Inside my apartment, Lily and Lucas shifted, the soft rustle of their movements reminding me that I was not alone anymore, not the girl they used to control, but a mother with someone to protect Dot. My mother was the first to speak. "Aaliyah," she whispered, as if my name might break if she said it any louder. I swallowed. My throat felt tight. "Mom." She looked past me into my apartment, eyes searching for something familiar, or maybe just for the comfort she had grown used to taking from me. My father did not step forward. He simply stood there like a wall that had walked up the stairs. "Can we come in?" she asked. There was a time when my answer to that question would have always been yes, automatic, reflex. The door opened before I even thought about whether I wanted it to. But now, something inside me had shifted, like furniture rearranged in a room while everyone was asleep. I stood there, hand on the door, and really thought about it. "Yes," I finally said. Stepping aside, they walked in slowly, as if they were entering a stranger's house instead of their daughter's home. My mother looked around at the toys on the floor, the framed pictures of the twins on the shelf, the small vase of flowers Lily insisted we keep so the house can smile. My father's eyes lingered on the worn couch, the stack of medical textbooks on the table, the unpaid kindness in the room that they had never bothered to see. Lily peeked from behind the sofa, clutching her rabbit. "Grandma?" she asked softly. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, baby," she said, her voice cracking a little. She opened her arms and Lily ran into them, the easy love of a child who had not yet learned about conditions and strings attached. Lucas walked over too, shy but curious, and my father bent down stiffly to pat his head. For a few minutes, the room was filled with small talk. "How big they've gotten. They look just like you. 3 already. Time flies." It felt like standing in a warm room with a cold draft blowing through a crack in the wall. Comfort and distance at the same time, but I knew they had not come only to see the twins. People do not cross silence and pride unless they want something, and my family had always been predictable that way. After the children wandered back to their toys, my mother finally turned to me. "We need to talk," she said. Those 4 words had always meant the same thing in my family. You're about to be asked to fix something again. I sat down on the edge of the couch. My parents tipped the chairs across from me like we were about to start some formal meeting and not just talk between people who were supposed to love one another freely. My mother cleared her throat. "We've noticed." The payment stopped. There it was. No asking if I was recovering well. No apology for the message that sliced through me like a blade in the A. No, "We're glad you're alive." Just the missing money, suddenly louder than everything else. I nodded slowly. Yes, they did. A silence followed, heavy and thick. My father leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Why?" he asked. The word landed between us. Not gentle, not curious, demanding, as if I had canceled a magazine subscription without permission. Instead of cutting off years of financial bleeding, I looked at him. "Because I almost died," I said quietly. "Because when I needed you, you called me a burden." My mother winced. My father's jaw tightened. For a moment, they both looked away, as if the truth was a light too bright to face directly. "You know, we didn't mean it like that," my mother said quickly. "We were just stressed. It was a bad day. Your brother's situation, the bills, everything." My brother. There it was again. The gravity well everything eventually fell into. He was the golden child. The promise that never quite materialized. always on the edge of becoming something great, always needing one more loan, one more chance, one more rescue. My life had become the bridge beneath his feet, something to walk on without ever acknowledging the weight. "You had tickets to a concert?" I said. My voice was still calm. It surprised even me. I was bleeding in the hospital, Mom. My mother's eyes shone. "We didn't know it was that serious." "You didn't ask," I replied gently. "You didn't call back?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. My father looked at the floor for a long moment, then back at me. "We need your help," he finally said. There it was. The real reason. The kernel at the center of their visit. "What kind of help?" I asked, already knowing the answer, but wanting them to say it out loud. "The bank is threatening foreclosure," he said. "The mortgage is behind 3 months. My heart ached in that familiar, tired way, not a sharp pain, but a deep one. Like something worn smooth from years of rubbing. "I've been paying it for 8 years. I said softly. "We know." My mother answered quickly, almost eagerly. "And we're grateful, truly, that we thought things were still covered. We counted on it." I watched them as they spoke, the fear in their eyes, the way their hands trembled, the exhaustion etched into lines around their mouths. They were human, flawed, afraid, and still, they had hurt me in ways they refused to fully see. "I can't do it anymore," I said. My mother's head jerked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I can't keep saving everyone," I replied. "I'm a single mother. I almost died. I need to take care of my children, my health, my life. I love you, but I cannot be your bank." The words felt strange in my mouth, heavy, brave. Final. My father stood up suddenly and began pacing the living room, each step filled with unspoken frustration. "So you're just going to let the house go?" he asked. "Let us lose everything?" "I'm not letting it happen," I said softly. "I'm just not stopping it anymore." My mother began to cry. Not loud sobbing, quiet tears, running down her cheeks like small rivers she did not even try to wipe away. "After everything we did for you," she whispered. "We raised you. We sacrificed so much." A familiar guilt rose inside me, the old reflex to fold, to apologize, to grab my wallet and fix it all. But another voice rose, too, quieter but strong. The voice that had spoken in the Aya when the text came in. The voice that said, "You matter too." "I know," I told her. "And I'm grateful, truly. But love is not a loan that I spend my life paying back with interest." My father stopped pacing and looked at me, really looked at me, as if he was seeing the adult version of his daughter for the first time instead of the child he could steer. "So that's your final decision?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes." The room filled with a new kind of silence, not the peaceful kind, but the one that sits in the center of the table like a heavy bowl. Too full to move, Lily and Lucas watched us from the rug, sensing the change in the air without understanding the words. Children are like that. Their hearts are barometers, measuring pressure we think we hide. My mother finally stood. She walked over to me slowly and placed her hand on my cheek. "I hope you never need us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because we won't forget this." The words pierced, not because they were loud, but because they carried a quiet promise, not of reconciliation, but of withdrawal. Love with conditions. Love with ledgers. Then they left. The door closed behind them with a soft click. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the wood grain as if it could tell me what came next. The days that followed were strangely peaceful at first, mornings filled with the smell of pancakes, tiny feet padding across the floor, the soft hush of the apartment at night when the twins finally fell asleep. I went to my shifts, came home, kissed scraped knees, answered curious questions about clouds and ants. For the first time in years, my money went only where it needed to go. Rent, food, childcare, co-pays. Savings that were more whisper than reality, but growing slowly. And yet, somewhere beneath that peace was a thread of unease, like a single loose stitch in a sweater. Will unravel if pulled. My family stopped calling. Not just less. Completely. Birthdays passed with no message. Holidays came and went like quiet passengers on a train that did not stop at my station anymore. My phone lit up only with work emails, reminders from daycare, the occasional check-in from an old friend. At first, I told myself it was fine, that I had wanted distance, that silence was better than being used. But some nights, after the children were asleep and the apartment was dark except for the streetlights bleeding through the blinds, I lay awake thinking of the house I grew up in, of familiar voices, of laughter that used to fill rooms before responsibility replaced it. You can love someone deeply and still know you must step away from them. Both things can be true at the same time, but life does not pause just because you are healing. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was thin, official, one of those envelopes that makes your stomach twist before you even open it. It was addressed to me, but the return address was from the county court system. My hands trembled a little as I tore it open. Inside was notice that my parents' home, the house where I took my first steps, celebrated birthdays, cried into my pillow over teenage heartbreak, was entering final foreclosure proceedings. They were losing it. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The letter spread out before me, sunlight touching the paper like it was trying to make it gentler. Willie and Lucas colored nearby, crayons tapping softly against the paper. I stared at the words until they blurred. I could fix this. I knew I could. One call to the bank, one wire transfer, a few signatures. I could save the house and rewind everything to the familiar, painful cycle we had lived in for years. But I also knew the cost, not just financial, emotional. Every rescue deepened the expectation that I would always be the net beneath their falls. Even if I was falling myself, I did not move. I did not call. Instead, I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope, then slid it into a drawer as gently as if it were made of glass. Weeks passed. Then, one evening, my doorbell rang again. The twins were asleep. The apartment was dark except for the soft glow of the kitchen light. My heart jumped, not fast, just sharply, like it recognized a pattern it was tired of repeating. I opened the door, this time. It was not my parents' it was my brother. He looked different than the boy frozen and old. Photographs, more tired around the eyes, more worn around the edges, life carving small stories into his skin. He held a backpack over one shoulder and an expression that was half apology, half expectation. "Hey," he said. I stepped aside. "Come in." He walked inside and stood there for a moment, taking in the toys, the pictures, the small life I had built without anyone's help. He smiled when he saw a drawing taped to the fridge, a scribbled heart with Mom written under it in crooked letters. "Kids." "Huh?" he said softly. "Yes," I replied. "Kids." We sat at the table. He didn't touch his backpack. He just stared at his hands for a long time before finally speaking. "We lost the house," he said. I nodded. "I know." He looked up at me then, eyes glassy, voice breaking in places he tried to hold together. "They blame you." The words floated between us like ash. I took a slow breath. "Do you?" He hesitated. That was the hardest part, not the question, but the delay before the answer. Finally, he shook his head. "I blame all of us," he said. "But mostly, I blame how we were raised to think love equals sacrifice, and the one who sacrifices most proves they care most." We talked for a long time that night, about childhood, about expectations, about the quiet pressure that had shaped us into versions of ourselves we didn't always recognize. He apologized, not for the house, not for the money, but for the years of letting me carry more than my share without asking if I was okay. When he left, the air in the apartment felt lighter, but the story was not done with me yet, because families do not unravel neatly. They fray, tangle, knot, and sometimes snap in sudden, unexpected places. A few days later, I received another message, not a long one, not emotional, just a single sentence from my mother sent late at night. When truths tend to surface, we need to see you. It's about the children. My heart tightened, not my children. Their children, my niece, my nephew. The things unsaid in that message were louder than the words themselves. And as I read it, holding my phone in the quiet darkness of my living room, I knew one thing for certain. The storm in my family was not over. In fact, it was only just beginning. And what I was about to learn next would not only test my strength, it would test what kind of mother, daughter, and person I truly was. The message from my mother sat on my phone, screen like a small storm cloud. We need to see you. It's about the children. I read it again and again. My first instinct was panic. My second was doubt. My third was that familiar, tired ache in the center of my chest. The one that said, they only reach out when something is wrong. I typed several replies, deleted them, typed again. Finally, I sent back 2 words, come over. The minutes before they arrived felt longer than hours. The apartment was quiet. The twins were coloring on the living room floor, humming to themselves. Outside, the sky hung low and gray, as if it too was waiting for something. There was a knock at the door. When I opened it, my parents were standing there, but this time they looked different. Not angry, not demanding, just frightened. They came in without speaking. My mother held her purse close to her chest like it was a shield. My father's face was pale, his mouth a tight line that looked carved there. What happened? I asked. My mother sat down slowly. She took a long breath, like someone about to dive underwater. It's your brother, she said. And the children. My heart began to race. Are they okay? I whispered. She nodded, but the nod was shaky. They're alive, but things are bad. I felt the room tilt slightly, like the floor had shifted beneath us. She explained in small, broken pieces. My brother's life had been unraveling faster than any of us realized. The foreclosure, the job loss, the debt, they were only the surface. Underneath was something darker, exhaustion, depression, and choices made from fear instead of clarity. The children had been caught in the middle of it all, moving from place to place. Nights spent on couches, arguments they should never have heard. Then my mother said the sentence that froze everything inside me. Child Protective Services got involved. The words rang in my ears. CPS, children, my niece and nephew. The small people who once wrapped their arms around my neck and fell asleep on my shoulder during family dinners were now names on paperwork, cases in a system that steps in when something has gone too far. I closed my eyes for a moment. I saw their faces. I heard their laughs. I remembered birthdays and school drawings, and the way they always tugged on my sleeve to show me something important, like a seashell or a crooked Lego tower. What do they need? I asked. This time, my father spoke. They might be placed into foster care, he said slowly. Unless a relative steps forward. The room grew very still. A relative. The realization came not as a shock, but as something heavy settling into place, like a book, sliding into the only empty spot on a shelf where it clearly belonged. My parents watched me quietly, searching my face for an answer before I even spoke. They did not ask outright, but the request hung there, thick and undeniable. Why me? I asked softly. My mother started to cry. Because you're steady, she whispered. Because you're kind. Because you're the one who always shows up. The same reasons I had always been relied on. Leaned on, taken from, now asked again, but this time, not for bills or houses or rescues. This time, for children, real children. Hearts with eyes, lives with futures. I sat there for a long moment, feeling two truths inside me that did not cancel each other out. I was tired, and I still loved them. I thought of Lily and Lucas, small hands, sleepy smiles, whispered questions before bed. My life was already stretched thin like paper held up to light. Another responsibility would change everything. My schedule, my finances, my home, my breath. But I also thought of empty bedrooms in strange houses, of strangers' voices calling their names at night, of my niece holding her brother's hand in fear and confusion. I looked at my parents. I need the full story, I said. Everything. So they told me about arguments that turned into shouting, about unpaid bills turning into eviction notices, about my brother's heartbreak and his bad decisions, about my sister-in-law leaving suddenly, disappearing into some fog of her own pain, unable or unwilling to take the children with her, about teachers noticing changes, about officials knocking on doors. With every detail, my heart broke and hardened at the same time. Finally, my mother whispered, "We're too old, too unstable now. They won't give the children to us, but they would to you." The words trembled through the room. I stood and walked to the window. The sky outside had begun to drizzle, raindrops sliding down the glass in slow silver lines. Below, cars moved through wet streets and people hurried under umbrellas, each carrying stories no one else could see. My reflection stared back at me in the window. Tired eyes, faint scars from the accident, hair pulled back in a quick knot. A woman who had been stretched between saving others and saving herself. Could I do this? Could I become mother to 4 overnight? Could I open my home and heart wider than they already were? Behind me, I heard Lily and Lucas giggling softly as they played, their laughter small bells ringing through the air. I turned to look at them, my 2 miracles, living proof that love multiplies instead of divides when given space. Something inside me settled. I'll meet with CPS, I said finally. I can't promise anything yet, but I will listen. I will show up. My mother covered her mouth as she cried. My father looked down, his shoulders shaking once in a way I had never seen before. The next few days moved like a dream, wrapped in paperwork, meetings, home evaluations, questions about income, health, support systems, long conversations about trauma and adjustment, about bedtime routines, about how children carry invisible weight in small backpacks no one else sees. When I first saw my niece and nephew again, they looked older than they should have, not in years, but in the eyes. Kids who had learned grown up. Lessons too early. My niece ran into my arms and shook as she cried. I didn't know where we would go, she whispered. I thought maybe nobody wanted us. I held her tighter than I have ever held anything in my life. You are wanted, I said softly. You are loved. You are safe now. CPS approved temporary placement with me while longer-term arrangements were discussed. That first night, I stood in the hallway outside the bedroom where all 4 children slept, 2 in beds, 2 on mattresses on the floor, the room filled with soft breathing. Small sighs, the rustle of blankets. My apartment felt too small. My future felt uncertain. My heart felt crowded and wide open at the same time. I leaned against the wall and slid slowly to the floor. Tears finally spilling down my face, not from regret, but from the sheer size of the moment. Life had changed. Again, not with a car accident, not with a cruel text, but with 4 sleeping children in one small room. Trusting that tomorrow would be gentler than yesterday. In the weeks that followed, I learned a new rhythm. 2 lunchboxes became 4. 2 sets of shoes by the door became a messy pile. Homework time, therapy appointments, CPS check-ins, late night talks with my niece when fears crept back into her mind and she needed reassurance that morning would still come. Some days, exhaustion sat heavy on my shoulders. Some nights, I watched the clock and wondered how long I could keep everything together. Work, motherhood, paperwork, emotions. That there were other moments. Moments when all 4 children laughed at the same joke. Moments when Lucas held his cousin's hand without being asked. Moments when my niece drew a picture labeled "Our Family" and every figure was smiling. Began to realize something, that family is not the people who call you a burden when you're bleeding. Family is not the ones who measure love by how much you pay. Family is the people whose hearts rest against yours at night and do not doubt they will still be welcome in the morning. One evening, as I was washing dishes, my phone buzzed. It was my mother again. "Your brother wants to talk to you," she wrote. "He says it's important." I dried my hands and walked into the quiet hallway. The children were in the living room watching a cartoon, their laughter warm and bright. I stared at the message for a long time. "Important," I called him. His voice sounded different, raw, humbled, stripped of the pride that had once wrapped around him like armor. "I heard," he said softly, "about the kids, about everything you're doing." I didn't say anything. I just listened. "I don't deserve your help," he continued. "I know that, but thank you. You saved them." I closed my eyes. "They saved me too," I whispered. He breathed shakily. Then his voice changed, heavier, serious in a new way. "There's something else you need to know," he said. Something I didn't tell Mom and Dad yet. Something about why everything really fell apart. I leaned against the wall, heart beginning to pound again. "What is it?" I asked. There was a long silence on the line, the kind you feel in your bones before the words arrive. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely more than a breath. "It wasn't just money. It wasn't just bad luck. Someone did something." The room around me faded. Someone did something to him, to the children, to me without me knowing. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, the sound of children's laughter floating down the hallway like fragile music. And in that moment, I realized the truth. The story was not finished turning. It was only now beginning to reveal what had been hiding in the shadows all along. And what my brother was about to confess would change not only my family, but the way I understood everything that had happened from the very beginning. Never imagined that healing would feel so quiet. There was no dramatic music, no applause, no sudden sunrise that washed away years of hurt. It came slowly, like a soft wind moving through an old house, touching dusty corners that had been ignored for too long. After that night, the confrontation, the truth spoken aloud, the tears, the silence. My life did not magically become easy, but it became honest. And honesty, I learned, is a strange kind of comfort. The next morning, my house felt different. It was the same kitchen, the same chairs, the same little socks on the floor from my twins, Lily and Lucas, but the air felt lighter, as if something heavy had finally been carried outside and left there. For the first time in years, I woke without bracing myself. I did not rehearse conversations in my mind. I did not prepare my heart for disappointment before even getting out of bed. I made pancakes for the twins. They laughed when the shapes looked funny. They smeared syrup everywhere. Lucas got it in his hair and said, "Mama, sticky." Lily announced proudly that hers looked like a dinosaur, even though it didn't. And I watched them. Really watched them. I thought they deserved this version of me. Not the exhausted me. Not the desperate for approval me. Not the silent, aching me who kept waiting for love to come from people who had already told her. in so many ways that it would not. They deserved a mother who was present. Later that week, I went back to the hospital for follow-up tests. The same building where I had once dialed my parents' number with shaking hands. The same fluorescent lights. The same smell of antiseptic and coffee. But I walked in differently. I was not begging this time. Not holding a phone and hoping someone would choose me. I was simply me. The resident at the desk smiled. Dr. Whitmore, we're glad you're okay. I nodded. Me too. Those two small words held so much. I had spent years pouring myself out, financially, emotionally, physically, into people who did not see the pouring as love. They saw it as supply, as convenience, as something they were owed. I used to think that walking away from them was cruel. Now, I understood staying had been the cruelty to myself. Healing did not mean forgetting everything that happened. It did not mean pretending that the group chat message didn't exist. It didn't erase the sentence burned into me. You've always been a nuisance and a burden. Those words would always be part of my life story. But they were no longer the title. They were no longer the refrain I repeated in my head when I felt tired or lonely. They became something simpler. Something smaller. Just words spoken by people who were unable to love me the way I needed. I found new rhythms. Work, rest, bedtime stories with the twins, where Lucas always interrupted and Lily always corrected his words. Coffee by the window when the rain tapped gently on the glass. Long walks where I let myself cry without hiding the tears from anyone, not even from myself. I also found my voice in small ways. No, I can't do that extra shift. No, I won't be covering that expense. No, I'm not available tonight. Each no was a door closing softly, not slammed, not angry, just closed. Because I finally understood that my time and my heart were not endless resources for others to drain. One afternoon, I was sorting mail at the kitchen table while the twins colored on the floor. Bills, a flyer, a medical statement, and then tucked among them, an envelope with familiar handwriting. My mother's. My hands paused. For a moment, old instincts tried to rise. The part of me that wanted to rush, to fix, to smooth everything over. The little girl inside me whispering, maybe this is the apology. Maybe this is the moment they say they were wrong. I held the envelope for a long time. Then I opened it. There were no apologies inside. Just explanations, justifications, a list of reasons why their lives had been hard. Hints that I had overreacted. A sentence that read, we hope you realize family is family. And beneath it, a request written almost casually. Can you restart the payments for the mortgage at least? We are struggling. I read it twice. Something inside me went very still. I did not feel anger. Not even shock. Just clarity. A clear sky after a storm. I folded the letter back into the envelope and placed it in a drawer. I didn't need to write back because I finally understood something important. Family is not defined by obligation or by guilt or by what others expect you to sacrifice until you collapse. Family is defined by care. By the person who sits with you when you're bleeding in a hospital bed. By the little voices who say, Mama, stay, and mean it with their whole hearts. By the people who do not call you a burden when you are at your most fragile. For so long, I had believed I had to earn my place in my parents' lives. Now I understood. My place had never been secure there, no matter how hard I tried. Days turned into weeks. The twins grew a little taller, a little surer of themselves. I grew too, in quieter ways. I laughed more easily. I slept more deeply. I spoke more gently to myself when I made mistakes. And then one evening, just as the sun dipped low and turned the living room gold, there was another knock at my door. Not urgent, not angry, just Patient, I froze for a moment, my heart slowing and then speeding up again. I wiped my hands on a towel. I looked toward the twins playing with their blocks on the rug, and I walked toward the door. Every step filled with the weight of everything that had happened, the accident, the message, the decision. The silence that had grown between us. My hand rested on the doorknob. This knock was not the past. It was something else. Something or someone standing on the other side. Waiting, I took a breath, and as I turned the handle, one quiet thought went through me. My story isn't finished yet. The door began to open, and what I saw standing there would change everything again. When I opened the door, the world seemed to slow down. It wasn't dramatic. No thunder. No wind rushing through the hallway. Just an ordinary evening light, soft and golden, resting gently on the person standing outside. It was my sister. We hadn't spoken in so long that her face looked both familiar and distant at the same time, like a photograph you've carried in your wallet for years. Her eyes were tired, not from anger, but from living. She held no letters, no ledgers, no lists of what I owed or what I should fix, just herself. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The twins peeked around my legs, curious and unafraid. She smiled at them, a small, trembling smile, and then looked back at me. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said quietly. "I just wanted to see you." Those words, simple as they were, felt like a warm blanket laid gently across my shoulders. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place where I had once cried alone, the same wood where bills had been sorted, decisions made, and boundaries drawn. But now there were crayons spread across it and little cups of juice and crumbs from cookies. The twins didn't finish. Life had filled the space. Where silence used to live. We didn't try to solve the past in one conversation. We didn't rush forgiveness like it was a race we were both late to. We spoke slowly, carefully, honestly. Sometimes we paused and just listened to the ticking of the clock or the soft laughter of the children in the next room. She said she was sorry for not standing up for me, sorry for staying quiet when quiet had hurt me. I told her I was sorry too, not for leaving, but for the years we spent trying to fit ourselves into shapes that were never meant for us. Mostly, we talked about small things. Her job, my residency, the funny things Lily and Lucas said, the way grief sits beside you some days and hope sits beside you on others. We didn't untangle everything, but we touched the knots gently, with patience instead of blame. When she left, there was no big promise. No dramatic hug in the rain. Just two women at a doorway, with a soft understanding between them. We would try, gently, honestly, at our own pace. After the door closed, I stood there for a long moment. The house was quiet again. The evening settled around us like a calm ocean. The twins ran up to me, arms lifted, asking to be carried. I scooped them up, one on each side, their warm cheeks pressed against mine. I thought back to the hospital bed, the ringing phone, the message that had felt like a final verdict on who I was. And then I looked at the life that had grown in the space created afterwards. I realized something soft and steady. Sometimes life removes people not to leave you empty, but to make space for peace. Healing did not mean everything was perfect. My past still existed. The lonely years still lived inside me. The accident still replayed sometimes in my mind when the nights were very quiet. But the difference now was this: I no longer believed that my worth depended on who stayed or who left. I no longer waited for approval like rain in a drought, no longer carried love like a burden. I tucked the twins into bed. Lily asked for the story about the moon again. Lucas asked if the moon ever gets lonely. I told him something I now believe deep in my bones. "No," I said softly. "The moon is never lonely. Even when it looks alone, it is still surrounded by stars. After they fell asleep, I sat by the window. The city outside was calm. A few lights in faraway windows, a gentle breeze moving the curtains. I breathed slowly, hand over my heart, not to check for damage anymore, but to feel the steady rhythm of something still alive, still hopeful, still open. My life didn't break the night of the accident. It opened. It showed me who would rush toward me and who would turn away. It showed me the difference between love that costs you yourself and love that grows with you. It showed me that sometimes walking away is not an ending, but the beginning of becoming who you were always meant to be. I don't know what every chapter ahead will hold. There may be more knocks at the door, more conversations, more healing that comes in small pieces rather than grand moments. But I do know this: I will meet whatever comes with a steady heart, not begging to be chosen, but already knowing that I am enough. I turned off the lights. The house rested. The night wrapped itself around us like a soft blanket. Somewhere in the quiet, I felt gratitude, not for the pain, but for the strength that rose quietly beneath it. And as I closed my eyes, one peaceful thought settled inside me like a final line in a story. Sometimes the most powerful goodbye is the one you give to who you used to be.